24시간 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Coming up on Arirang News, citing data from Tokyo Electric Power Company, the South Korean government confirms the radiation level of the seawater collected from the coast near the tsunami-wrecked Fukushima plant stands within the normal range. The second part of the Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise, the annual summertime combined military drills between South Korea and the US, have begun. Involving all military branches, US strategic assets could be deployed. After years of lockdowns during the COVID pandemic, North Korea cracks open its borders, allowing its citizens to return home. But the South's Unification Ministry raises concerns over defectors from the regime also being sent back home. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with Japan's wastewater release from the tsunami-wrecked Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that began last Thursday. Referring to data provided by Tokyo Electric Power Company, the South Korean authorities say that samples collected from seawater near the plant are within the safety standards. But to address concerns at home, the government pledges to bolster inspections on imported seafood. Our Song Yoo-jin leads us off.
It's been 4 days since Japan began releasing wastewater from the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant into the ocean. And so far, test samples show that seawater near the plant is safe. The focus is on tritium, a radioactive form of hydrogen that persists even after the wastewater undergoes purification through the ALP system. Up until Sunday, 1.53 million liters of wastewater had been released. And the Tokyo Electric Power Company, the plant's operator, has been monitoring the radioactivity levels of tritium in the offshore seawater.
We consider tritium radioactivity concentration of up to 700 becquerels per liter within 3 kilometers of the nuclear plant and 30 becquerels within 10 kilometers as safe. As of Sunday, tritium radioactivity concentrations within 3 kilometers of the plant were found to be lower than the minimum detectable level of 4.6 becquerels.
To further address concerns about the potential impact of the discharged wastewater, South Korea's Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries began a special 100-day joint inspection of imported seafood products on Monday involving both government and private entities. They will check whether importers, distributors, and retailers have accurately labeled the country of origin of imported seafood. Roughly 20,000 businesses are set to be inspected.
We are extending the inspection period from 60 to 100 days compared to the initial inspection carried out between May and June. We will conduct 3 or more visits to each business to ensure proper verification.
Failure to label the country of origin can lead to fines of up to 10 million Korean won, or around $7,500 US. Those who forge labels could face imprisonment for up to 7 years or a fine reaching 100 million won. And regarding the 3 experts that the Korean government sent to Japan to monitor the discharge, they held their first meeting with the IAEA's Fukushima office after arriving on Sunday. They're discussing with IAEA officials and the Japanese government the duration of their stay and specific tasks they will carry out. This is part of an earlier agreement between Seoul, Tokyo, and the IAEA to send Korean experts to the latter's office every 2 weeks to monitor the wastewater release. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
The Japanese government has called in the Chinese ambassador to Tokyo, Woo Jang-hao, to complain about harassment calls following the release of wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. Japan's Vice Foreign Minister Masataka Okano on Monday expressed deep regret over repeated phone calls believed to be originating from China. An official from Fukushima City Hall said they started receiving calls with the China country code +86 last Thursday, and the number of such calls exceeded 200 the following day, causing disruption to city employees going about their work. The official said schools near the nuclear power plant have also received harassment calls, and local media reports say hotels and restaurants have been getting similar calls as well. But in response, the Chinese embassy in Tokyo said it too had been receiving these kinds of calls from Japan that have caused serious interference in the normal operation of the embassy. President Yoon on Monday pushed for a high-tech advancement of maritime patrol, marking the 70th anniversary of the Korea Coast Guard. Attending a ceremony held in the western port city of Incheon, Yoon voiced his support for the country's maritime law enforcement, saying that the safety of the waters are vital to South Korea's global trade as a rising sea power. He pledged to support the establishment of a data platform on maritime information driven by cutting-edge technology.
위성, 드론, 수중 로봇, 정찰기 등으로 수집한 빅데이터를 AI로 분석함으로써 관할 해역의 범위를 70%까지 확대하고 각종 해상 재난에 신속하고 정확한 대응을 할 수 있게 됩니다.
Thanking the uniformed guards for their service, the president asked the Coast Guard to prepare for and promptly respond to maritime accidents to protect the lives and safety of people at sea. This week, South Korea's annual summertime joint military drills with the U.S. enter their second phase, involving all military branches, including the U.S. Space Force part for the first time. U.S. strategic assets could also be deployed to ramp up readiness against the North. Choi Min-jung takes a closer look.
For the next 4 days until Thursday, South Korea and the U.S. are conducting Part 2 of their Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise. Unlike the first phase held last week involving the government's civil defense exercise, the second phase is conducted exclusively by the military. It involves the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps of both South Korea and the U.S. It aims to strengthen joint readiness in any possible emergency situation involving provocations by North Korea in the face of the North's advancing military and cyber threats. The U.S. Space Forces Korea, established last year, will also take part in the exercise for the first time. It will play a big role in analyzing Pyongyang's missile and nuclear capabilities. One expert says one of the biggest advantages would be quick information sharing.
There's great significance that the US-ROK can share real-time information on North Korea's nuclear and missile capabilities with the formation of a space force in the US-ROK.
It's also highly likely that the U.S. will deploy strategic assets such as B-1B strategic bombers during this exercise.
Having B-1B strategic bombers as part of Seoul and Washington's combined exercises shows that extended deterrence efforts against North Korea are becoming more real.
United Nations Command member states are also scheduled to participate in different capacities. Participating countries are Australia, Canada, France, and more. This time around, there is a total of more than 30 combined outdoor military drills, double that of last year. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
After years of lockdowns during the COVID pandemic, North Korea cracks open its borders, allowing its citizens to return home. But the South's Unification Ministry raises concerns over defectors from the regime also being sent back home. Bae-eun-ji has more.
After shutting itself off from the rest of the world in early 2020 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, North Korea has finally reopened its borders. The North State media announced over the weekend that it has allowed its citizens living abroad to return home in an easing of virus measures and border controls. But it still required those returning to do 1 week of quarantine. In response, the spokesperson for South Korea's Unification Ministry said Monday that he's worried about the possibility of North Korean defectors arrested and detained in China being sent back home.
Our government is very concerned about the possible repatriation of North Korean defectors in China. We stress once again that they should not be forcibly sent back to the north against their will.
Human rights advocates in South Korea have been voicing similar concerns, as China is reportedly detaining as many as 2,000 North Koreans for leaving the regime without permission. They will likely face severe punishment once sent back home. The Unification Ministry spokesperson also said the North does not appear to have fully opened its borders, as the regime has only granted approval to its own citizens living abroad. He said North Korea is presumed to have faced economic difficulties during its border closure, and that the regime probably made the decision after experiencing many difficulties when all personnel exchanges were blocked. Experts predict the North's announcement will lead to the return of North Korean students and workers, mostly in China and Russia, who are a key source of foreign income for the regime. Also, the North has already signed up to take part in this year's Asian Games in Hangzhou, which will kick off on September 23rd. All eyes are now on whether the regime will send a high-level delegation to the international event, possibly including key officials such as Kim Yo-jong, the powerful sister of Kim Jong-un, and Choi Ryong-hae, to strengthen relations with China. In 2018, Kim Yo-jong made a surprise visit to South Korea during the Winter Olympics held in Pyeongchang. She was accompanied by Kim Young-nam, the head of the Presidium of the Supreme People's Assembly at the time. 배은지, Arirang News.
The number of new COVID-19 cases in South Korea is declining, according to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency on Monday. The KDCA reported 37,000 new infections for last week, down nearly 9.5% from the week before. The reproduction rate, which indicates the number of people each patient infects, has also remained below 1 for 2 consecutive weeks. The health agency expects the ongoing downward trend to continue until early to mid-September. Meanwhile, starting this Thursday, the nation will lower the infection category of COVID-19 from the current level 2 to level 4, the lowest for managing infectious diseases. Following the adjustment, almost all COVID-19 measures, including state support for testing, will come to an end. The consumer price growth at home, which recently went below 3%, is likely to rebound largely owing to oil price pressures. Our Moon Hae-ryun reports.
Concerns over rising food and oil prices continue to persist in South Korea as consumers prepare for the Korean Thanksgiving holiday in late September. According to a report released by the Bank of Korea on Monday, persistent heavy rain coupled with extreme heat in the country will likely contribute to price hikes for fresh produce. In July, the price of lettuce and spinach almost doubled, and prices for agricultural goods rose by 4.7% compared to the year before. While the overall on-year consumer price index growth fell to the 2% mark last month, the Ministry of Economy and Finance predicted on Sunday that it will jump back up to the 3% mark over the next 2 months. July's growth rate, measuring at 2.3%, was the lowest seen in over 2 years and came after 5 consecutive months of decline in the on-year increase. Eased inflation was largely attributed to weakening oil prices, but with oil prices rising for 7 weeks in a row in South Korea, this is expected to change. On average, gasoline prices stood at around $1.31 per litre last week, a large jump from $1.18 at the start of last month. This comes on the back of a resurgence in global oil prices, which have gone up since July, with prices for Brent crude oil jumping by around $10 per barrel during the July to August period, and prices in South Korea affected the 2 to 3 week delay. With the national holiday Chuseok at the end of September into October, the ministry expects high prices to persist with high demand, as consumers buy food and gifts for the holidays. Finance Minister Chu, however, stated in a National Assembly meeting last week that the inflation rate will drop to the 2% mark again following the holiday and maintain an average of some 2% until the end of the year. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
South Korea and India may benefit the most from the rise of digital trade as rivalry between the US and China intensifies and trade is increasingly made up of digitally consumed services. According to Bloomberg on Saturday, Goldman Sachs economists stated in a report to clients this month that countries that prioritize the free flow of data and pursue agreements easing cross-border digital transactions have the chance to jump ahead, while those with a protectionist or excessive national security bent attitude may fall behind. The note also said the digital trade sector could be an influential source of support for current accounts in South Korea and India. South Korea is seeing high value-added exports to China undermined by Beijing's domestic replacement policy, while India faces a high import bill for equipment to build out its manufacturing base. Korea may enjoy an extended Chuseok holiday period starting late September and into early October if the top office approves a related request made by the ruling party today, hoping to help the economy. Kim Do-yeon explains.
The ruling People Power Party has made a request to the presidential office to review designating Monday, October 2nd as a temporary holiday, creating a 6-day-long holiday period. Opening the leadership meeting on Monday, the party's chairman, Kim Gi-yeon, announced that the request has been made as South Korea looks forward to its first long holiday since COVID-19 became a Class 4 virus, the lowest designation for managing diseases like the seasonal flu. South Korea celebrates its annual Chuseok holiday or Thanksgiving on Thursday the 28th and Friday the 29th of September. The following Tuesday, October 3rd, is National Foundation Day. The addition of temporary holiday on Monday in between would mean a prolonged 6-day vacation period. Kim also added this could boost the domestic economy through the long holidays, with many schools autonomously already deciding to close on that day. Now that the request has been made, the top office will review the request. Upon formal discussion between the PPP and the government, it will be put on the agenda for a cabinet meeting where members will review its designation. Cabinet meetings usually take place every Tuesday, but it isn't on the agenda for this week's meeting yet, meaning it will likely be September 5th before a decision is made. Back in 2017, then President Moon Jae-in designated October 2nd a temporary holiday, giving people 10 straight days off. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Today, the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition Democratic Party each began their 2-day party workshops in the cities of Incheon and Wonju, respectively. President Yoon Suk-yeol visited the PPP event himself and encouraged the lawmakers to head in the right direction in the governing country.
우리 의원님들 아침 새벽부터 시작해가지고 밤 늦게까지 정말 정신없이 지내시는데 이렇게 연찬회를 통해서 우리가 함께 어떤 방향으로 갈지에 대해서 우리가 의기투합도 하고 우리 스스로 함께 또 성찰하고 이렇게 하는 것이 정말 중요한 일이라고 생각합니다.
Meanwhile, the PPP leader Kim Gi-hyun emphasized the need for balance and harmony within the party as it gears up for the general election next April. In a separate workshop, the DP also focused on strategies for the general election as well as preparing for next month's regular plenary sessions. In the opening remarks, party leader Lee Jae-myung stressed the importance of legislation for public welfare. Now in Beijing, the commerce chiefs of the US and China have met amid tense trade-related issues between the world's two largest economies. Washington has stressed the importance its economic relationship with Beijing. Our An Sung-jin with the details.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Raimondo stresses it is profoundly important that the world's two largest economies have a stable economic relationship. This in remarks made to her Chinese counterpart Wang Wentao in Beijing on Monday, saying that although it is challenging, progress can be made if the two are direct, open, and practical. Wang in response said China is also ready to work with the U.S., adding that the bilateral economic ties are not only significant for the two countries, but also to the world. The U.S. Commerce Department had lifted export controls for 27 Chinese companies just days before her visit, which saw positive remarks from Wang.
China welcomes the U.S. decision of removing the Chinese entities from the unverified list. It shows that the two sides can address specific concerns through communication on the basis of mutual respect.
During her 4-day trip to Beijing and Shanghai, Raimondo, in her meetings with Chinese officials and business leaders, is expected to discuss boosting trade and tourism where both superpowers can find common ground. Raimondo is the latest and the fourth key figure from the Biden administration to visit China after Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and climate envoy John Kerry. One expert says the U.S. is trying to mend ties with China to boost economic growth, ahead of the U.S. presidential election coming up next year.
Since the 1980s, the ruling power has not won the election when the country's GDP has fallen under 2%. The current economic growth of the U.S. stands around 1%.
As the meeting also comes amid concerns over the faltering Chinese economy, the expert added that Raimondo's visit is likely to bring results that will be beneficial to the economies of Washington and Beijing. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Also on the international front, genetic testing by Russian authorities reportedly affirms the death of mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin in a plane crash that occurred last Wednesday. The Kremlin denies Western speculation that Moscow is behind the crash. Our Lee Kyung-eun has the latest.
Russia's investigators have confirmed that Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin died in a plane crash, completing the genetic test on those on board the private jet that crashed last Wednesday. Russia's aviation agency concluded that Prigozhin and Dmitry Okhin, his right-hand man, were among those on board.
As part of the investigation into the plane crash in the Tver region, molecular genetic examinations have been completed. According to the results, the identities of all 10 dead were established. They correspond to the list stated on the flight sheet.
The plane crash came 2 months after Prigozhin led a failed mutiny against the Russian army's top brass. Russian President Vladimir Putin initially vowed to crush mutiny, calling a stab in the back that could potentially trigger a civil war in Russia. But hours later, a deal came to allow Prigozhin to go into exile in Belarus. After the plane crash, Putin sent his condolences to the families of those who died. Meanwhile, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, who brokered the exile deal, said on Friday that he warned Prigozhin to watch out for possible threats, and he insisted that Wagner fighters will remain in Belarus. But Prigozhin had twice dismissed the warnings.
The second time when he visited me with Dima Utkin, I strongly warned them, lads, you watch out.
However, Lukashenko said that he believed Putin had nothing to do with the plane crash. The Kremlin said on Friday that Western suggestions that Prigozhin had been killed on its orders were an absolute lie. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
An AI phone service here in the country seeks to offer the elderly regular attention and to alert relevant authorities of any related distress. Yoon explains.
Mr. Beck is 78 years old. Someone calls him to ask if he slept well and is eating his meals. It's as if it's his granddaughter calling to check in on him.
식사는 잘 챙겨 드시고 계세요?
예, 오늘 점심도 잘 먹었어요.
요즘 어떻게 지내세요?
그냥 하루하루 그냥 시간은 잘 가요.
On the other end of the phone is actually an artificial intelligence companion. And the two have a conversation like this once a week.
I feel like if this develops further, it could really be another friend.
Gyeonggi-do Province has started this elderly companion service for seniors who live alone. The generative AI companion uses large-scale language models like ChatGPT to make deeper, more involved conversations possible.
I didn't know it was a robot calling. It's comforting to get a call like that.
During these conversations, if there are any distress signals like expressions of depression, loneliness, or difficulty living, the AI detects the situation as a sign of crisis and alerts the emergency welfare call center, prompting a real person to check in. Also, in the event of 3 attempts of unanswered calls, welfare service staff step in to make direct contact. Should those calls also be unanswered, welfare service representatives from local municipalities will visit the residents.
The elderly population in Gyeonggi-do Province is surpassing 2 million. Every year, this number increases by at least 200,000. It's difficult to keep up with a personalized care service.
In this day of a rapidly aging population, demand for such personalized care services is growing, which has brought great attention to the capabilities of such AI companion services. Ian-jin, Arirang News.
The entire nation is forecast to be lashed by heavy rain until Wednesday. For tomorrow, rain will be concentrated across south of the country. Parts of Jeollanam-do and Gyeongsang-nam-do provinces will see heavy downpours of up to 150 millimeters. The surrounding regions, including Gyeongsang-do province, will see up to 120, and central regions, including here in Seoul, will see up to 100 millimeters. Locally heavy downpours may batter some regions overnight. Torrential downpours of 30 millimeters per hour are expected. Between tomorrow dawn and the afternoon, the south coast will see torrential downpours. From the daytime to the evening hours, the Seoul metropolitan area and Gangwon-do province will see heavy rain. And rainy spells will be dominating for the morning hours. Seoul and Daegu will be starting off at 24 degrees. Highs in Seoul will peak at 26, Gwangju 30, Gyeongju will be topping out at 27 degrees. And with the rain, summer heat will take a brief respite for the remainder of the week. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That brings an end to this Monday night newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest news. Hope everyone has a good start of the week.